Welcome to another episode of the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast, the podcast where we sit and sip, talk all things Civil War history and bourbon and whiskey. I'm Jack, joined as always by my co-host Elijah. Today we are coming to you from the historic Bell House in beautiful downtown Winchester, Virginia. The Bell House is preserved and maintained by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, the managing entity of the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District, and the official sponsor of the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast. If you like what you hear and you want to support the podcast, consider becoming a member of the Battlefields Foundation. Every dollar you give to help support battlefield preservation in turn helps the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast. You can head over to their website at www.shenandoahatwar.org. That's shenandoahatwar.org. Click on ways to give and membership, and membership start as low as $35 and go till you can't give no more. So go on, head over there, become a member today, and help support battlefield preservation here in the Shenandoah Valley and the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast. Elijah.
Jack.
Here we are.
You might have done that intro in one breath.
No, I breathed.
That was quick. He was running out.
You could hear it at the end of some of the words. I was like, but we're fine now. Just a little puff of the inhaler. But Elijah, here we are. Once again. Exciting episode. Great guest here today in the room. Pete Dalton, historian, author, legendary Civil War tour guide, volunteer of the
extraordinaire.
Former Volunteer of the Year award recipient for the National Historic District.
A couple years ago.
Yeah. He critical asset to the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation and the National Historic District, and for all folks across the country that have come out to tour the Valley's battlefields, and if you have had the pleasure of riding around with Pete, I'm sure it's an experience you'll never forget. So Pete's in the room with us, and we're excited for this topic today. But before we go any further, Elijah, tell us what we're sipping on.
So we've got Southern Star High Rye Bourbon. This was one of the two that they had been so kind enough to send us.
Yeah.
We did their Paragon Wheat Bourbon quite a while back now.
It's for our third Winchester episode.
Yeah, with Scott. Yeah, that was a really good one, and we've been hanging on to this one for just the right episode, just to space them out enough. But I've been excited to try this one. You have too.
Yeah. But nice pop.
Outstanding.
It's just been sitting there.
Yeah, like I mentioned, this is a high rye bourbon. So this is going to be 60% corn, 36% rye, 4% malted barley, and it's 90 proof. So you're looking at 45% ABV. Right off the nose, like as soon as I pop the cork on that, you could get that rye, that green apple kind of smell. At least that I personally get out of a rye or a higher rye bourbon.
Oh yeah, just that punchy in the nose type of rye smell, in a good way.
It's funny because it's not so much the spice that you would expect. It's more of a nice sweetness. But
give it a taste. Like it's sweet.
That is very spice. Yeah. No, that's for having such rye content. There's not really any spice to that. That was very, very mellow and sweet. Especially for like it being a 90 proof. That's,
not
a bad thing by any means. That was actually very, very good.
Pete?
I was smelling it too, and it does smell like apples. I mean, I've said that the last time I was here, but this even more so.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't typically get that off of rye, especially high rye. You'll get more of the spiciness of a rye, but that apples comes through strong.
Yeah, and it is. I thought it was rather spicy, but it actually has a good flavor.
That one for me just had like a very sugary, sweet kind of.
It is sweet,
which is, I mean, to be expected with any bourbon for the most part. But I mean, that one is just like very sugary almost. Impressive though.
Yeah,
very impressive. I think the only other whiskey I've had that I could compare that level of like apple note to would be like Pinhook's rye whiskey. I don't know if you ever tried that. I think I just kind of had that in my personal collection.
I remember when I first tried like Elijah Craig.
Mm-hmm.
I like got some apple more than other bourbons out there, but yeah, this is almost. It's apple pie is one of those things where obviously you're getting apple and spice, and I don't want to call this.
Compare it to, yeah.
But it's almost like a deconstructed apple pie where you're getting a lot of those notes independently, then merged together to like a slice of apple pie. But it's all the good things that make up apple pie, just not apple pie itself. If that makes sense.
Liquid apple pie.
Yeah. Ingredients. This was good. And there's like no burn on the end, and if there's any,
No,
it's from the spice of the rye.
Yeah, no, it's very, very mellow. I mean, 90 proof is pretty
Mellow
standard,
already,
yeah. But I mean, that's awesome.
That's a really good product.
Thank you, Southern
I would be
Star.
afraid to drink too much of that this morning or this afternoon.
Whichever time we're filming at,
Yeah,
not going to let the
whatever
listeners know.
Whatever fits into the schedule.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. I have to say it is very good, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely not 10:32 on a Saturday.
Yeah. And I'm
Never.
And I'm definitely not a connoisseur, but I prefer this to the one I had a few months ago when I was here. This is
What did we do for Pete's episode?
I don't remember what it was.
That's terrible that we don't know.
It's been a while, okay?
Yeah.
But I want to. Wasn't there the Woodford Double Oak? Or no, that was with.
It had a connection to
Oh, it was the
Torino.
Smoke Wagon.
Smoke.
Desert Colt.
Yes. Okay.
At Vegas. I think it's made in Vegas.
Yeah,
or-
Las Vegas.
This
Yeah.
is very smooth. The other one was good too, but this is very good.
Well, and the cool thing about Southern Star is I've started whenever we got these bottles from them right away. From some people I know, they were like, "Oh my god, I know what Southern Star is," and it's like not a super well known. It's not your Elijah Craig, your Bland, it's not that. But the amount of people compared to other bourbons we've received or talked about or whiskeys on the show,
Locally, it's very well talked about
Yeah,
and very well
yeah.
received. Yeah.
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 And yeah, I think this is my personal opinion. I think I like this one more than the. Do we have the other one here?
Paragon?
Yeah.
No, that was at my house.
Oh,
Sorry.
Elijah. It's
Sorry.
okay. I was like, we could have just tried them both again.
Yeah, side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Southern Star out of Statesville, North Carolina. We still have to go down there and tour the place.
Did they give us tickets?
Yeah, we've got tickets.
Oh man,
Got tickets.
North Carolina is a happening place in the bourbon scene. I feel like just
Yeah,
between
no, they're
them
popping up.
and
for sure.
Weldon Mills, which that'll be a visit I'll never forget.
Yeah.
That was a great experience. And if you haven't listened to that episode with Weldon Mills, go ahead and listen to that one after this one. But yeah, North Carolina's just like Virginia. I mean, Virginia's it's kind of been on the scene for a while, but this plus Weldon Mills plus everything else they got going for them, it's exciting to see what's coming out of there.
Good history of whiskey. I mean,
Oh yeah,
Virginia, North Carolina, two of the earliest
Yeah.
colonies. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the ones that started the whole thing.
Yeah. Before the Civil War, Virginia, especially the Shenandoah Valley, was a major producer of whiskey.
yeah,
It was.
yeah.
If you look at the records, thousands and thousands of barrels were made every year.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
kind of the ingredients used for it were grown right here in the Shenandoah Valley.
They certainly were.
I mean, you could say that about what's grown here today, but
Yes.
yeah. Well,
I know
cool.
one more thing about this before we dive in. That is actually, like, I keep thinking about it. That's actually probably in, like, my top 5, like, ever.
Of ryes or bourbons?
Just bourbons.
Holy-
Like, that is very, very good. It's very
Breaking
sweet.
news.
Breaking news.
I wish
yeah.
we had like a soundboard. Wah, wah, wah.
No, it's just, like, very sweet, but very just, like, approachable and very, very good.
That's really good.
Dude, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
a bourbon drinker, but it's having sampled 2 here.
Mm-hmm.
It's in my top 2.
Hey, that's a start. That's a start.
Yeah, this is really good. This is wow.
Easy.
It's super
Mm-hmm.
easy. Like, and there's some people out there, and I'm myself included. I like to pop an ice cube every once in a while in there just to sip on something cold.
That one doesn't even need it.
You don't
really.
need that. Like, if you're a guy that likes his whiskey with some rocks, some ice, you don't need it for this one. You don't need it. Drink this straight, and you'll feel a little bit better about yourself when you go to bed at night. This was really good. I love the bottle too. I think I talked about that on Scott's episode, maybe.
That classic old label.
Yeah, just old label bottle shapes. You don't see this. This is more of like an old school bottle. I feel like you'll see something similar for like a Weller's, but Weller's a very distinct shape more than this. But it's cool. It's got this little ticket kind of ripple on the end and almost like money design. Like when you look at a dollar bill, you see some of this like weird, super detailed lines and stuff like that. Reminds me of that.
With a lone star on the label?
It's a Southern Star, Pete.
Yeah.
Okay, it's
Southern
the
Star's
standard. No, I don't know. What's
No,
the?
we gotta go tour that place. We gotta go visit them. I want
Yeah.
to try more of their stuff.
Yeah, this was cool. Everybody, go grab it. Is this an ABC's?
Yeah, ABC. I think just within the past year or two, I think around the time that they sent us those is when ABC started carrying them, maybe slightly before that. Yeah. But I have seen that and the Paragon that we've had on the shelf there. Okay. But I know they've got a few other expressions. I think it might just be like a distillery only or something that they only really put out in North Carolina.
Yeah, ABC's starting to get some stuff, I think. Like, yeah, they've got Devil's Due.
They're coming around. I never thought I would say that, but they're coming around, yeah.
As a former employee of the establishment. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, cool. Our glasses are now kind of semi-full. We've been just sipping through this so far. It's a great pour. But like we said at the beginning, Pete Dalton, Peter, is here with us. Do you prefer Pete or Peter?
Yes.
Okay. Love it. I've just always known you as Pete, but I always hear people call you Peter.
You know, around the house, it's that old phrase, if it's Peter, I'm in trouble.
Okay.
If it's Pete, things are cool.
Well, Pete, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Just a couple weeks ago, you were wandering the halls of the historic Strayer House in Newmarket, Virginia, as I was sitting in my office trying to preserve battlefield land, and Pete comes walking in, or I think I summon him. I don't know how you enter the room, but it's besides the point.
Right through the door.
Right through. He does come through the doorway.
Yeah.
And somehow we dive into this topic. Don't know how. About this family, specifically these brothers, and their story, and what for many, many years historians and students of the war have believed and told themselves to believe and written and rewritten about, and how some of that might not be true. And we were just able to connect on the point where we both have researched and written, you more professionally than I have, but about this topic and these brothers in a specific moment, and how we came to learn that the moment we both researched and wrote about isn't what we think it is.
Yes.
But it's not far off, but it's just not as romanticized and perfect for our idea of the war as we thought it was going to be.
And the difference is you weren't personally reprimanded by the great-great-grandson of one of the Goldsborough brothers like I was.
No, mine was just
more at stake here.
Yeah, mine was just internal shame after I decided to hit send on what I had written, and I was like, I don't feel confident in what I said there's so many holes, but I said I had to just get this information to this person so they at least had something to go off of. So mine was more personal shame. Yours was, corporal punishment by the ancestors or descendants, sorry.
And I took it off the web, so.
It's, no longer on the website. Mine's not publicly accessible. Yeah. So I think we're safe, but we've just outed ourselves.
That's right.
And this is a thing that most people, when they think of the American Civil War, whether you're a professional or armchair historian or just a general student, or you're just interested, or maybe you like whiskey and bourbon and you're listening to some losers talk not Pete, sorry. Elijah and I, losers.
I definitely wouldn't say that.
No, but listen to some people talk about the Civil War. Anytime we think about the war, we often directly draw the connection between the Civil War and the war of brother against brother versus brother, father versus son. This conflict that obviously divided one country, but also divided families. And we always hear instances and moments throughout the conflict, this 4-year war, of specific moments during this war, whether it be battles or somewhere else, where they're actually fighting and it's against each other and it's documented. Mm-hmm. And I think this all starts, and you can kind of take it from here, Pete, but this all starts with the questioning, at least for me it did, of this one moment of brother versus brother at the Battle of Front Royal. But I want you, before we even get into that, maybe just introduce us to our characters for this story.
Okay. And I'd like to give you some background.
Yeah, please do.
Sure. So there are actually not just 2 brothers, there are 6 brothers. One of them unfortunately died at 9 months from a childhood disease, and his name was William. And so the name William gets used again later on for a second child that's born. But in this case, there are actually 5 surviving boys and 1 girl named Mary. And Mary has a great story too, but we're not going to include her in what we're talking about today.
And this is the Goldsborough family.
This is the Goldsborough brothers, right? And so there are 5 of them. There's William, there's Charles, there's Leander, there's Louis, and Eugene. And all of them have a direct connection with the Civil War. Each one of them has written a little bit about their life, and it's available. The 2 main characters, though, are William and Charles. So what I want to talk about is their background. Of course, they're from Maryland, okay? So all of the brothers and even the sister, they're born in the town of Graceham in Maryland. It's in Frederick County. They were the sons of Leander and Sarah Goldsborough. And the Goldsborough family is a very prominent family in Maryland. And it's interesting because they were involved not just in politics, but in agriculture and in the social lives, the kind of the prominent social lives of people from the state of Maryland. Several members of the family held prominent positions, including Robert Goldsborough, who was a U.S. Senator, and Phillips Lee Goldsborough, who was the governor of the state. Leander and Sarah Goldsborough, the parents of the children we're going to be talking about, were very active. And it's interesting because the youngest child, Eugene, was 4 years old when this particular episode in their family takes place. The family actually crossed the country with these 6 children, including the daughter, in 1848. And this is a quote, "It was behind an ox team when gold was discovered in California at Sutler's Mill in early 1848. So included in this adventure to the West Coast was a trip down the Mississippi River. They had a meeting with Kit Carson, which is kind of interesting. They had an encounter with the Mormons in Salt Lake, in Salt Lake City or in the Salt Lake region of, so it's an interesting trip they make to the West Coast, and they go out to do prospecting. And their efforts at prospecting in California, and I'll quote this, it's a downright disappointment. And 2 years later, though, they returned to Maryland, sailing around Cape Horn, and then resettling in their own native state. So in the early 1850s, the Goldsborough family was politically active too. So the same family was involved in what was called the Lopez Expedition. Have you ever heard of the Lopez Expedition?
No.
It was in the 1850s, and it was an expedition to Cuba to liberate Cuba, which is kind of interesting. The goal of the excursion or the adventure that they had was to annex the island to the United States. The expeditions were largely supported by pro-slavery factions in the South and were aimed at overthrowing Spanish rule and establishing Cuba as a slave state. Of course, it completely failed, but it probably says a lot about the family, maybe in their beliefs in, slavery. They were either probably pro-slavery. So what takes place with their children is probably even more interesting. So the first child I'd like to talk about is Charles, and he was born in 1834. Following the family's failed expedition to the West Coast and the Lopez expedition, he began to study medicine in his father's office and at the University of Maryland in 1855. On March 4th, he married Mary Neely. They moved to Hunterstown in Adams County, Pennsylvania. Adams County, does that ring a bell?
It does, Pete.
Does it? Where is it?
Gettysburg. Well,
it's
Gettysburg's in Adams County.
That's right.
Don't ask me, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, Elijah wouldn't know.
So anyway, it's interesting that he gets married and moves to basically Gettysburg.
So this is Charles.
This is Charles,
Okay.
and it's 5 miles northeast of Gettysburg. So
Do we know why he moved to Adams County?
He was married, and we don't really know why he moved, but he decided he bought a large farm, set up his medical practice, and kind of thought this is the way life would be.
What year was this?
This was he moved there in 1857.
Okay.
So the couple had 2 daughters. They had Gracie Annie, born in 1858, and then they had Mary, who was born on March 4th, 1860. His wife died from complications from childbirth, and then the daughter that was born, the second daughter, also died of disease 6 months later. So when 1861 turns, kind of comes around, he's a single father with one child. So when the Civil War broke out, Charles traveled back to his home state, and he joined the 5th Maryland Infantry as a surgeon in September of 1861. So thinking back to Front Royal, the two regiments that fight against each other, 1st Maryland versus 1st Maryland, and he's in the 5th Maryland. So that's...
He could transfer, Pete. Come on.
Okay. We'll go with that. But
Yeah.
I think you'll find out that's not true. So in late October of that, the 5th Maryland set up camp actually in Lafayette Square in Baltimore when the war, first began. And in October that year, following the Battle of Ball's Bluff, Charles was assigned to duty at the old barracks at Frederick City in Maryland. And he was there to assist in establishing a division hospital for General Banks' boys who were about to go into winter quarters in and around that place. So he was transferred from the 5th Maryland, but he's sent to Frederick to help set up a hospital there. So the Frederick Military Hospital was established in the old Hessian barracks grounds in Frederick. And this is to quote from Charles. It says, "It was not a great while before our hospital had grown to considerable size. With a fine medical staff and attendants, as an open winter created a large amount of sickness in the various camps, some of which were very unfavorably situated." Charles, during that time frame, chronicled a lot of things that went on. One of them, he says, the boys had a nice time during the winter of 61-62, barring the mud that was generally knee-deep, attending balls and parties and making love to the pretty girls of Maryland. I know it's a touchy...
This is a G-rated podcast.
Okay. And he says not a few of them were captured by them. So it's apparently they were successful, and maybe even some of them ended up marrying some of the ladies, from Maryland. He also observed that it was a hard winter upon the troops, which would be Banks's troops. And he says, and many poor fellow got no farther in his effort to suppress the rebellion than the little cemetery in the hill beyond the barracks.
So this is the winter of 61 into 62.
That's correct.
Okay.
So he's in Maryland still. So it says, as the spring returned to Maryland, Charles was on duty at the hospital in Frederick when General Banks commenced his memorable campaign up the Shenandoah Valley, followed by his equally memorable retrograde movement out of it into Maryland again, which we consoled ourselves was one of the most masterly retreats in the annals of warfare.
I love that he remembers it that way, because I don't think any historian today calls that a masterful retreat.
Well,
but that's a cool perspective.
It is, yeah, and it gives you the idea. He has a sense of humor, even in war.
Do you think he was
being sarcastic?
Or do you think
so.
that he was genuine?
I think that maybe he didn't have a lot of confidence in Banks, having spent the winter with him.
Well, this is after the whole name Commissary Banks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right. All of this, of course, was provoked, actually, by General Stonewall Jackson's masterly
There we go.
Shenandoah Valley campaign.
Okay.
So he also says maybe Jackson did pretty well, too.
Or he was being sarcastic there. This
That's right.
This guy's
That's right.
it's the Shane Gillis of 1862.
So
Speaking of riddles here.
Yeah. So Goldsborough says, the summer passed away and the bloody battles on the peninsula had been fought and Pope defeated, and our hopes and fears were chasing each other from zero to blood heat and back again like the mercury in the thermometer. Our hospital was no longer a division, but a general hospital, and one of the very best in the country. So on September 5th, September now, 18...
So we've passed the Battlefront Royal in 1862.
Yes, he doesn't mention it because he wasn't there.
Okay, Pete. I'll give that to you.
Okay. We'll get to
No,
that.
he wasn't there.
Yeah.
So September 5th, 1862, Charles was the officer of the day at the hospital. At this time, of course, Robert E. Lee is moving north towards Antietam.
Yeah.
So, and he says, near midnight that day on September 5th, Charles received a dispatch from General Nelson Miles at Harper's Ferry.
Dixon Miles?
Nelson, it's...
I don't know. Continue. I'm
okay.
sorry. I'm just so used to hearing the name Dixon Miles.
Yeah,
before
me too.
Ferry.
Now, I mean, now that you say it, but I think his name was Nelson.
It could be.
Yeah. He got a message saying, Lee's army will enter Frederick tomorrow. Any property that you don't want to fall into the hands of the enemy had better be destroyed. Our communications will soon be destroyed here. The following day, Dr. Goldsborough recalled that there was a commotion at the entrance of the grounds among the group of watchers as a single horseman clad in butternut dashed through the gate up to and in front of where we were sitting, reined up his horse, brought his carbine to his shoulder, covering then the officer of the day, who was Dr. Heaney. Dr. Heaney had risen to his feet and stood at the head of the stairs with his badge as officer of the day over his shoulder. The Confederate cavalryman said, I demand the surrender of this post in the name of General Lee and the Confederate States of America, while he was still covering Dr. Heaney with his rifle. The doctor turned to Charles and said, what do you think I'd better do? And Goldsborough said, if you're prepared to defend the place, tell the man so. If not, surrender it. And, of course, Heaney said, I surrendered, sir. And he did. He surrendered the hospital at Frederick to the Confederates.
Okay.
The Confederate cavalryman, he was a member of White's 35th Battalion.
Comanches,
that's right, of Virginia Cavalry. He explained, noticed that the doctor was rather embarrassed by having to surrender everything, but he advised us to keep within the grounds until the army had passed and taken possession of the city, and then rode off after promising to send a guard. So on Tuesday, we were paroled and permitted to go upon the streets and to our hotels. But what a change had come over the city. Everywhere was found the butternut instead of the blue. The general behavior was good, and rarely did any act of outrage or disturbance occur. The strictest discipline was enforced in every case. In fact, the common soldier appeared too wretched and inanimate to care for anything but to eat and sleep. Kind of talks about the condition of the Confederate Army, and not necessarily a flattering way. So the Confederates threw themselves down anywhere and slept. They ate anything and everything that was offered them, and about 800 of them stayed in the hospital when the army moved away. How men famished and footsore could fight as they did was a question I asked myself over and over again. The discipline was perfect and cruel towards the private soldier. Kind of an interesting observation. But then just as suddenly as, the Confederates appeared, General Ambrose Burnside's infantry swarmed through the city, driving the Confederates before them towards South Mountain. Soon thereafter, of course, commenced the series of terrible battles of this campaign at South Mountain and Antietam. So, following Antietam, Dr. Goldsborough writes that he spent an extended period of time tending to the wounded soldiers at the General Hospital in Frederick. There is a hint that he may have been pulled away to Fredericksburg following the fight there, but I couldn't confirm that. What I can validate was that Charles was reassigned to the 5th Maryland Infantry and spent the late winter and spring of 1863 on Maryland Heights at Harper's Ferry, where his regiment performed guard duty while recovering from their losses sustained at Antietam. On June 2nd, 1863, they were transferred to General Robert Milroy's command at Winchester. So that's how we start to get Charles to Winchester for the Second Battle of Winchester. Okay. And then there's brother number 2, William Goldsborough. He is born in 1831 in Frederick County, Maryland. From early manhood, the career of Major Goldsborough was replete with the stress and storm of arms. As a lad, he ran away from home to enlist for the war against Mexico, but was overtaken by his parents in Baltimore and taken back home. He was only 15 years old. So his parents didn't want him heading off to fight in Mexico.
What?
I know.
Who would do such a thing?
So William was a member of the Baltimore City Guard Battalion. He was, which was a prominent militia in Baltimore, and it was part of the Maryland Volunteer Militia's 1st Light Division. In 1859, elements of the City Guards under the command of George Stewart participated in the suppression of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. Militiamen forced John Brown to abandon the positions in the Army, forcing him to fall back into what became known as John Brown's Fort, right? It's noted that when the militia charged into the armory, one of the first men into the armory was William, who was, of course, a member of the militia. Well, what's interesting is when Robert E. Lee shows up, he offers the militia the opportunity to attack John Brown's fort first, and the commander says no. They don't do it, but of course, what happens is, Robert E. He has some Marines with him, and they do make the attack. But it's interesting that William, even before the war, has this connection to John Brown in the upcoming Civil War. So he was there.
I feel like a lot of people have that, like Jackson and other people can, like everybody was there. Like Turner Ashby was there, I think.
That's
and
right.
Goldsborough was there.
Yeah,
So
William Goldsborough.
we're just filling in all the gaps of people that were there.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is interesting. So William had actually worked as a printer before the war. And in May 1861, he was 30 years old, and he enlisted as a private and Captain Edward R. Dorsey's Company C of the 1st Maryland Confederate Infantry. The regiment arrived at Camp B, B-E-E. Have you ever heard of Camp B?
I've heard of General B. Elijah's heard of Camp B.
I have heard of Camp B.
Talk about it.
Are we talking about it in Winchester?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
It's
This is your moment.
my moment to shine. From what I've read, it's what they say north of Winchester.
It is. It's 1/2 mile northwest of Winchester on Apple Pie Ridge.
Correct?
Yes, correct.
Apple Pie Ridge,
Which is
where Early makes his attack from to its West Fort. That's Apple Pie Ridge.
Is it though?
I think that's Flint Ridge. Apple Pie is where James Wood High School
Apple Pie
sits.
would be where West Fort is.
No, Apple Pie, I think, is it? I thought Apple Pie was...
Because the high James Wood's like the end of it.
Yeah.
So if it comes across the road, 522, technically where West Fort and everything is would be the continuation of that hill.
Yeah.
But I've always imagined Apple Pie Ridge from like James Wood North.
Right.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense because I've tried to measure the distance on that, and the distance doesn't measure up to like Old Town from how they describe it as how far north of town it is. I don't know.
If you go, by the way, if you're giving a tour of 2nd Winchester, which I've done several times, everybody refers to the hill where Ewell brought his artillery out and where he made his charge from as Apple Pie. So you guys have to get that straight because I'm not sure.
Yeah, no.
Locally,
that would
Apple
be
Pie
like
Ridge has always been from where James Wood High School is
Okay.
north. Right? Where Apple Pie Ridge Road runs.
Yeah, along that extension, and the ridge behind that is technically Flint Ridge.
Flint
and
Ridge.
like
You mean south of it? Or no, yeah, like it would technically be behind
Northwest.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's something you guys have to work out.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, I'm not very sure. But his regiment was joined up with the 10th and 13th Virginia as well as the 3rd Tennessee. And Colonel Arnold Elzey would become the colonel in charge of the brigade. And they would fight at the First Battle of Bull Run. And William Goldsborough, of course, would be there, and he would see the elephant for the very first time there. After that, well, of course, I always like to mention, too, that Elzey was the one responsible for pushing Oliver Otis Howard's brigade off from Chin Ridge. And that's where my favorite regiment, the 4th Maine Infantry, was fighting. So we'll let that go. Okay?
We'll let it go.
We'll let that
You had it and you let it go.
We'll let it go. So he was promoted to captain of Company A of the 1st Maryland and would participate in Jackson's Valley campaign. His regiment would fight against the 1st Maryland Regiment on May 23rd, 1862 at Front Royal. So rumors that William captured his brother here are false because, as we said, he was either in Frederick, Maryland in 62, right, for that whole year, and he was also in the 5th Maryland, not the 1st Maryland Northern. So, and as I mentioned before, I did get an email from the great-great-grandson of Charles saying, "You've made a horrible mistake on your blog. My great-great-granddad was not captured by my great-great-uncle at Front Royal."
So can you talk a little bit about where the confusion might possibly stem from?
I can't. I mean, it's a story that somebody made up. I fell for it.
No, but well, maybe here's my theory. Is
Okay.
Charles, or is it William? Which one writes? Who's in the 1st Maryland Confederate?
William is. He writes the history of the Maryland line.
In that account, he does reference the Battle of Front Royal, and in his post-battle writings of like as we entered the camps or something along those lines, or we saw the prisoners, or when we saw the prisoners, men from our regiment were greeting friends and cousins and neighbors and brothers
and sharing food.
And these were soldiers captured from the 1st Maryland U.S.
Right.
So it's not unplausible to say that, there was brothers from the 1st Maryland U.S. and connected to the 1st Maryland CS. But the specific instance, I think not everyone, but some people have taken William's account and twisted it to, he saw his brother because he's also but then there's also more to the story, their stories throughout the war as well, to where
That's right.
You could have just combined it there. But
you also got to think, is he referring to brothers as in like fellow Marylanders and not necessarily like
so that's
specific
also a possibility.
relatives?
Yeah,
That's true. And also, William's brother, Eugene, is also in the 1st Maryland Southern, and he would have fought with him there.
so it was brother with brother.
Brother
we know
with
for
brother.
sure there.
That's right.
So yeah, that's totally possible, Elijah.
Yeah.
That they considered them. As he's writing, Charles, right? William. Sorry,
Charles writes memoirs,
but William's the Confederate.
right? And Charles's memoirs just got sold for like $25,000 or something.
Damn.
And I was able to access some of it in the Maryland State Archives.
Is that they sold them from there?
No,
Oh,
they had copies,
Okay.
but the originals were recently sold.
well, as long as you got copies, it's just
Yeah.
good as the original.
Right.
Yeah, it's not entirely impossible to say that it was brother Marylanders. Now, in the moment, more than likely, because obviously Charles didn't write this account
Right.
immediately after. Is Charles? You're killing
Yeah.
me here.
William.
I need
William
pictures of him
This is
right
why
here.
it's so confusing.
Yeah, William wrote a history of the Maryland line.
Okay.
And published it in 1869.
So
4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, years after the war. More than 40 years now from 1862. But we know from firsthand accounts of some of those Marylanders about the speech given by, what's his name? Bradley T. Johnson.
Johnson, yeah.
After he gives, and you would assume after reading that account that there's no way they're going to consider the men that they're trying to kill brothers in the friendly way as, people that share the same state, because their pregame speech by their coach, Bradley T. Johnson, Coach Johnson, was, the women aren't even going to want to look at you when you return home if you choose not to fight, because they were an what was it? They were anarchy. What's the term?
They were They were going to revolt. They were not going to fight.
Mutiny. They were in mutiny. Yeah. So they had to give this pump up speech because Jackson's like, I want him up front. And they're like, we're not going to do it. And Bradley T. Johnson's like, you guys are going to look like fools. The women aren't going to even want to touch you or look at you. You shouldn't even come back to the state if you survive this. You guys are cowards. And they're like, rah, I'm ready to run through a brick wall. So after hearing that, it's hard for me to imagine that they would, after that battle, when they're seeing now their captured enemy, other Union Marylanders, that they would have saw that sense of, oh, we're from the same state. Now, it's
the
possible.
adrenaline, once the adrenaline
But
wears
once
off,
that
you might
wears
have a
off and
little
you're like,
moment of clarity.
Yeah, and the battle's over and you've won, and you're walking into camp and you're seeing your neighbors and your friends and your classmates and your possible brothers.
It's easy to be sympathetic as the victor.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And you ship them all off to Richmond to prison or something in a few days,
Yeah.
And the other thing that's kind of interesting, too, is the 1st Maryland fights at Front Royal, but where are they 2 days later? They're on the right of the line fighting the Union left at the First Battle of Winchester.
Yeah.
And June 6th, where are they? They're down.
Cross Key.
Or
Harrisonburg.
Battle of Harrisonburg. They're fighting down there.
Yeah.
And then 2 days after that, they're on the left of the line down at Cross Keys.
Yeah.
So they're pretty much, heavily involved in the fighting, even though they believe that they're no longer obligated to fight, that their time in the Army is up.
Yeah.
And they were wrong on that. It was actually not up until August, but, they were ready to go home for some reason.
It was hot.
A lot of walking.
It was late May,
So the 1st Maryland, I want to tell you a little bit more about them, okay?
Please do, Pete.
Okay. They participated in the Battle of Gaines Mills, Malvern Hill during the Peninsula Campaign. Jackson, on his march to Pope's rear at Manassas in August 1862, placed Bradley T. Johnson in command of General John Jones' brigade in the Stonewall Division. General Jones, having been disabled, Johnson assumed command and put Captain William Goldsborough in command of the 48th Virginia Regiment at 2nd Manassas. And they were reduced to about 800 effectives for nearly 2 days. They fought desperately and heroically at the railroad cut against Fitzjohn Porter's Corps. 4th included some of the 4th Maine guys again, which I have to always bring up, okay? And then during the Second Battle of Manassas, Captain Goldsborough was severely wounded with what was believed to be a mortal injury. And this is what is actually written by William. He says, "Careful nursing by hospitable Virginians in the Bull Run Mountains restored me in time to secure the captaincy of Company G of the 1st Maryland Battalion, which had succeeded the 1st Maryland Infantry because their time of service had expired." But shortly thereafter that, he was elected major under Lieutenant Colonel James R. Herbert in the 1st Maryland Infantry, which would actually muster out of service at Richmond on August 17th of 62. After the disbandment of the 1st Maryland Infantry, the soldiers of the former regiment found themselves in a precarious position. They were unable to return home to Maryland, having effectively committed themselves to the Confederacy for the duration of the war. With little choice, many joined artillery or cavalry units, while others waited to form a new Maryland Infantry Regiment. The new unit was initially known as the 1st Maryland Battalion, until it was officially designated as the 2nd Maryland in January of 64. So not an official Confederate regiment till January of 64. So they assumed the title of 1st Maryland Battalion. So in the early summer of 63, the 1st Maryland Battalion was assigned to George H. Maryland Stewart's 3rd Brigade and Major General Edward Allegheny Johnson's division. And on June 12, 1863, the Marylanders crossed the Blue Ridge Mountains through the Chester Gap on their way to Winchester. So now we have both brothers coming together at Winchester for the Second Battle of Winchester.
Yeah. Here we are.
And this is where they get together. But if you read on the internet, every single story says that William captured his brother Charles.
At 2nd Winchester?
At 2nd Winchester.
Okay.
And that's a possibility. But the question is, did it really happen? That's the question.
Are you going to answer that question?
I thought I would.
Okay.
So I wanted to bring up the 3rd brother, Eugene.
How could we forget Eugene?
Yes. He was born in 1844. I can place him as a 17-year-old private in Company A of the 1st Maryland Infantry. I know he's with the regiment at 1st Bull Run and was in Jackson's Valley Campaign and the Peninsula Campaign. When the 1st Maryland Infantry was disbanded, Eugene left Confederate service. In March of 1863, however, he re-enlisted in Company C of Harry Gilmore's 1st Maryland Cavalry Battalion. He would have participated in Gilmore's in the action that Gilmore had at 2nd Winchester and at Gettysburg even. So now we have not just 2 brothers, we have 3 brothers, and each in different regiments, all at 3rd Winchester. And
3rd or 2nd?
2nd Winchester. I'm sorry. Thank you. All at 2nd Winchester. So they've all kind of gathered together.
Yeah,
okay,
little reunion.
Yeah. There is a reunion that happens later, and I'll tell you about that, okay?
Oh, man, Pete. I can hardly wait.
Okay. So by the afternoon of June 13th, and this is just some stuff that kind of a filler, the combat at Winchester had become intense. Charles recalled, and this is him writing, the enemy now sent forward their infantry, and we met a foe that we could retaliate upon. With variable success, we fought them during the day. At times, we pushed them back and then were compelled to give way. Gordon had charged Elliott on our right and forced him back to Winchester. And our brigade took a position on the south of town in a cemetery, which we held when night came upon us. The cemetery was locally known as Camp Hill. Mm-hmm. The 2nd Maryland Infantry had fought in the immediate front of the 5th Maryland of our army and was in some cases brother against brother. And that's when he actually brings that up in his memoirs. So he says, at early dawn on the 14th, rain ceased and the sun clear and beautiful on the Sabbath morning, but the infantry soon commenced their firing along the whole line with a repetition of yesterday's results. The 2nd Maryland, or actually the 1st Maryland Battalion, he calls it that. He says, returning to the 5th Maryland on our side, Charles was aware that his brother William had been promoted to major in the 2nd Maryland. He borrowed a spy glass from a friend and examined the rebel lines as it came to the attack, and thought he recognized his brother William leading the attack on a sorrel horse. I mentioned this to you the other day. The officer rode along the rebel line on his horse several times, and our boys behind the gravestones were taking deliberate aim at him and firing. Presently, the sorrel horse and rider went down, and a shout went up along our whole line, and we saw nothing more of the sorrel horse or the rider. Charles, though, was able to determine that the rider that they had shot could not have been his brother, because he believed he would not have been in command of the regiment at that time. That was just something he assumed.
Okay.
And of course, William goes on, so we know he's not that rider. So when William is writing about what happened, he says, we recalled the enemy had withdrawn until they reached a stone fence about 200 yards from the town. When the fight was renewed and continued several hours, the enemy holding the position in a cemetery lot, it says...
This is crazy, by the way, because we just heard the account of the brother from the cemetery.
Yes.
In the 5th Maryland, and now we're hearing the account of the other brother fighting the cemetery.
That's right.
It's just nuts. It's nuts.
It is.
I mean, we were just in that area this morning, getting the coffees over there.
Yeah.
That's right there, where the cemetery's up on the hill right there.
That's right.
Over there behind, like, as you're in front of, now we're talking
Southwark.
like, yeah, well, no, Millwood. Yeah, and you hop up the hill.
Yeah.
And there's the cemetery next to John Kerr. No, Quarles Elementary.
Yeah.
That's the Catholic cemetery now, but it was the cemetery that was there. And then the stone wall they're talking about is down where, like, the Sheets is, in that intersection of Pleasant Valley and Millwood.
Okay.
So as they're coming up, because they're coming from 522, these are Johnson's guys who split off at front. No. Yeah, they came up from Front Royal on 522.
Originally, yes.
Originally, and so they're coming into town that way. So it's just nuts that you're getting both sides of the... This is cool. Keep going, Pete. I'm excited now.
Okay. It said, when the fighting was renewed and continued several hours, the enemy holding a position in a cemetery lot. So he's saying exactly what his brother is saying. The Marylanders finally drove them from with a loss. It says, we afterwards ascertained it was the 5th Maryland we had encountered. But in all that William writes in his book, at no point does he ever mention that he knew that his brother Charles was in the 5th Maryland. Never mentions it in his book, never ever mentions it.
But the book's post-war too, right?
It is post-war.
So you would assume, would have seen his brother.
Yes.
Right?
Well, let me go into that.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Okay. So, and then Meanwhile, Drew Burley had secretly moved, Harry Hayes and Avery and Smith's brigade out to attack West Fort, right? And Charles does a great job of describing the fighting there because he actually retreats from the cemetery, goes up on the hill, and he hears the firing going on. Mm-hmm. So he heads over to its West Fort to see if there has been any wounded men or injuries there. And he actually has a complete observation of what's going on with the men, the artillery bombardment, and then Hayes' troops making the attack. It's a great summary of what goes on.
Are you going to read it?
Do you want me to?
Go for it, Pete. I'm excited. You've got all these first-hand accounts that are nuts, so go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, about 5 p.m. Now, this is just narrative before, but about 5 p.m., Early was satisfied that all the necessary preparations had been completed, and his orders artillery rolled out of the woods. Apple pie? Oh, okay.
Flint Hill. I like Flint Hill.
Okay.
Flint
Ridge, whatever.
Okay. And he commenced his bombardment of West Fort, including Griffin's guns. 20 artillery pieces opened on the fortification. The firing continued for about 45 minutes. Charles noted the battery on Flint Hill worked savagely but was overmatched.
So they're calling the hill that West Fort's on Flint Hill.
That's right.
Flint Ridge.
Really?
That's what they just said. But that's more in line with apple pie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's weird.
I don't know why. Because the hills don't line up, Pete. When you're there at the... like south of the farmer's market and the tractor supply.
Yes.
That hill right there.
And by the way, the farmer's market sells the best apple pie I've ever had. And I figured that's because of the ridge. That's why they started making it, right?
I don't think they make them there. Maybe they do.
Because the ridge there, when you go up 522, up the hill towards Crossroads, that is Flint Ridge. That comes across.
522?
Yeah.
Albin? Or Nain?
Yeah, like at Albin, roughly. That is Flint Ridge.
Which
is, I know
Flint Ridge?
Yes, which I would imagine is a continuation further towards like Winchester equipment and everything, because apple pie.
But those are running parallel. Sorry, folks, if you're listening, we're trying to just dissect Winchester's geography real quick.
You have to know the area.
All right, whichever hill they were on,
okay,
we're just going with it.
Great apple pie. Okay. So, of course, most of the men that were making this charge in Louisiana regiments, the 6th, 9th, and 7th, they had fought at 1st Winchester. They were familiar with the territory. So this is what he says. Bolting out of the trees down the hill, they went swooping only occasionally to discharge their muskets. Inside the fortifications before them was 110th Ohio, each man armed with rifles. I'm not going to say repeating Henry because he doesn't know that. Okay, he doesn't say that.
We talked about that with Phil Spoggy.
Yeah, they had Henry rifles.
Yes, and it's supposed to be the first recorded time where it was used, but it's such a controversial, maybe kind of history.
I know Henry rounds have been found around Winchester. It's just very, very rare that you see them.
Okay.
It's archaeologically speaking, they have been found here. It's just trying to put a date to them is,
very hard, I'm
very
sure.
difficult to do.
Yeah.
Because Winchester is just constant occupation.
So that's why I purposely didn't say Henry repeating.
Yeah.
Okay. Finally, the Federals began to give way, and pretty soon the Louisianans with their battle flag appeared on the crest, charging the redoubts. That's all things that's being said actually by Charles. So Charles began to make his way to the forts and recalled he had barely reached his destination when Hayes made his charge, and our forces fell back in some confusion, both artillery and infantry. So all the supports in one mass, while the rebels gave us shot at short ranging from our own guns. The 5th Maryland was part of an unsuccessful counterattack which failed to retake West Fort. The infantry firing now ceased, but heavy cannonading continued until 10 o'clock. And then about 9 o'clock that night, they had that council of war, and Milroy decided that he had to retreat from town. Mm-hmm. So what I have from this point forward is what happened to Charles, what William did, what he records that he did, and you'll have to determine for yourself whether he could have possibly have captured his own brother.
Where would the capture have taken place?
It couldn't have. I'll have to explain that to you as we go.
We'll go.
Okay.
We'll get.
All right.
I love it, Pete.
So Charles recalled Elliot was met by some of Johnson's division that had been pushed around. Now this is
Elliot's a command.
right. Let me go back a little bit. Sometime around 3:30 in the morning on June 15, General Edward Johnson's skirmishers bumped into the van of Milroy's retreating column near the intersection.
Bumped into the van. I love that. Is that the first
That's
thing?
my
that
words.
That's your words. Bumped into.
Happened upon
It just
them.
happened upon a Pete. Come on.
All right.
There was a whole flank march that got them there to bump into
That's
each other.
right. Well, they bumped into each other, you know.
It's like they bumped into each other at Gettysburg, you know?
Yeah,
Just
well, they
accidental.
did. They did. So Milroy faced his column to the right on the pike and prepared to fight his way through by attacking the enemy. Meanwhile, Johnson deployed his regiments along Milburn Road, as they came up and advanced them to the railroad tracks. Here he placed 2 artillery pieces from the 1st Maryland Artillery, CSA, on and around. Actually, one of them was on the Charlestown Railroad Bridge, right? And one of them was near it. So Charles recalled Elliot was met by Johnson's division that had been pushed around from the south of town and immediately opened fire upon us. Many of Elliott's brigade was already passed and continued on. So he's saying some of Elliott's men actually got through before they were cut off. Ely formed his brigade as well as he could, considering the confusion ensuing, while the Ohio Regiment and a West Virginia Regiment and the 67th Pennsylvania also formed a line and charged the guns that were playing upon us over a clover field. But Walker's brigade supporting them, we were driven back. In the meantime, our line was melting away by squads, as everybody knew it was a forlorn hope. Milroy showed his courage to the last by riding up and down the line, addressing the men in language more forcible than elegant. That's all right. A second charge was made, but the clover was high and tangled, the men tired and worn out from the fighting and marching, and it lacked spirit, but the men fought notwithstanding. It then became a rout. That's what he says. And I can't pronounce his sauve qui pere, which means a general rout occurred, and was expressed on most faces as not spoken. It was now getting towards morning, and the 5th Maryland, 18th Connecticut, and 87th Pennsylvania, or such of them that remained together, finding themselves cut off, surrendered. Also an Ohio regiment just across from us in a woods, Carter's Woods. These regiments had been the nucleus of the battle on our side while the rest were leaving. My recollection, the last I saw of Milroy, was after the last repulse. He galloped from the field with some others off to the left, with the most painful expression of face I ever saw. I hoped he might escape, knowing the bad feelings towards him by the rebels in town, and he did, though I thought at the time his show was a poor one. So that's Charles. He's over at Stevenson's Depot, right? Let's see what William is doing. And this is what William writes, okay? At daybreak on the 15th, this is taken from the book. Yeah. Major Goldsborough put his skirmishers in motion and proceeded cautiously through the streets of Winchester without encountering the enemy. The 2nd Maryland skirmishers, with the exception of a portion of Company A under the command of another man, immediately took possession of the Star Fort, capturing some 200 prisoners. The Star Fort for the day was made a receptacle for prisoners. William was obviously in Winchester, undoubtedly at Star Fort, when his brother Charles was captured 4 miles to the east at Stevenson's Depot. Mm-hmm. So the chances are very good that he actually did not capture it. He was 4 miles away. Yeah. But he was at your favorite place, though, right? Star Fort. Absolutely.
He was at Arby's? It's like, oh, my God. Sorry, Star Fort, I forgot.
So Charles was captured actually near the Carter farm and marched back to Winchester. Here he found his rebel brother, William, who had been appointed provost marshal of the town for gallantry displayed in the fight. A provost marshal's responsibility is to inventory captured supplies and register prisoners. So that's where the two of them got together at Star Fort. That's my guess. That's my best guess.
If that's where he was processing.
Yeah.
I mean, because obviously he says he's in Starfort.
Yeah.
But by the time his brother gets marched back, is that still where he is processing prisoners, or is he in town set up? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a provost marshal expert, but it makes sense that he would, because it's, I've heard the same thing, that the forts themselves, not just Starfort, but probably like Fort Milroy too, were used as holding pens for these prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
And it would make more sense that the provost would travel site to site to take inventory of, so going to West Fort, going to Main Fort, going to Starfort. So possibly, they're at Starfort. That makes sense, Pete.
And he definitely would have seen his brother's name on a list.
Oh yeah. Well, do they interact?
I don't know. I have no way of telling that.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I thought this was the moment where you actually
moment of truth.
Yeah. Where you,
No.
Okay. So we don't know if they actually met each other.
That's
there.
right. But it is interesting, though, that the fighting in Winchester produced nearly 600 wounded, which would have kept the doctors busy. So they were, Charles was given a pass and a parole and went about trying to help the wounded, both sides, okay? And he went to the Taylor Hotel and set up his business, so to speak. Surgeons and chaplains were allowed to go about at will. Not being regarded as prisoners, they were sheltered in nearby houses in Winchester. On the morning of June 20th, though, Charles, along with the remaining surgeons and chaplains, were ordered to gather at Winchester's Union Hotel. Now, Union Hotel, actually, when the war began, they changed the name.
The Onion Hotel?
They took the UN off and called it the Ion.
Ion. I thought they did Onion.
They didn't want to, and that makes sense that they would probably do that.
Ion, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So they did that. So they were, the assembly, all of them were sent to the Ion Hotel to await further orders.
Which I believe was up on, if you're keeping track, up on Piccadilly Street.
Was it?
Just across from, it's where like Bank of Clark County is today.
Okay, I know where that is.
Right there on Loudon.
Right there on the corner.
Yeah, across from, next to the monument, I guess, across Piccadilly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it says the entire assembly was soon, they were gathered to await further orders. They were soon put into march column and pushed south along the Valley Pike. They were told their destination was Richmond. So Charles is going off to prison. So one of Charles' fellow captives, and somebody he knew, his name was Reverend George Hammer, wrote of the men that were heading down, which would have been surgeons and doctors, surgeons and reverends. He says, most of them were half-clad, many shoeless and hatless and unfed. Nothing to eat but what we begged or bought off citizens who hated us intensely. The journey to Stanton covered 96 miles and took 4.5 days to complete.
All on foot?
On foot.
That's insane.
This is what Charles said, 4.5 days. And I'm thinking, that is an incredible march.
Hold on, let me put that in my... You keep talking, Pete, and I'm going to interrupt you when my GPS tells me how long it takes.
All right. So it said the exhausted, dust-covered, and footsore men were segregated into groups of 80 and loaded into freight and cattle cars belonging to the Richmond Central Railroad and shipped off to Richmond. The passengers were not given any rations, received little water, and they did not allow any rest stops to relieve themselves on the way. The trip on train took a little bit over 24 hours.
From Stanton to Richmond.
Stanton to Richmond.
Okay.
So they don't stop to let them relieve themselves, and they give them almost no food and almost no water.
But during the march, they were able to stop.
They marched for 4.5 days, got on cattle cars, and went to Richmond when they spent 24 hours on cattle cars without being allowed out until they got to Richmond.
Well, they could pee in the car, right? I will say my GPS said it's going to take 1 hour. 1 hour. 1 day and 23 hours. So basically call it 2 days if you walk nonstop. So then add in 8 hours to sleep or less than that and some breaks. It takes 4.5 days sounds right. Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd probably take me 6, but these guys had somewhere to go.
I couldn't do it in 4.5 days. I can tell you that.
Pete could do it in 4.
So Charles and the other surgeons were led to believe that they would be quickly passed through to the United States. That's a quote. Instead, they were marched to Liberty Prison, where they were registered and examined by the prison inspector. All their possessions were taken from them, even the ones that might be used to ease the suffering of the sick and injured. Charles would remain here in prison for the next 4 months, all the while trying to negotiate with his captors an exchange of surgeons, currently held both in Union and Confederate prisons. He would linger in Libby Prison until October of 63. William, on the other hand, is off on a great adventure. William is continuing his journey north to, along with the rest of the Second Corps, in the journey they take to Gettysburg. The regiment I had mentioned before is commanded by Lieutenant Colonel James Herbert. The 1st Maryland Battalion would bring some 400 men with them to Pennsylvania and the field of battle at Gettysburg. So the 1st Maryland Battalion, or 2nd Maryland, would not be involved in the fighting on the first day at Gettysburg. On July 2nd, however, the Confederates attacked Culp's Hill with the 1st Maryland, 10th, 23rd, and 37th Virginia Regiment, along with the 3rd North Carolina. They assaulted the Union breastworks there. George S. Greene's brigade of the 12th Corps was they were the ones defending the position. The Marylanders and others were initially able to breach the works and drive out Greene's men and hold their position until the next morning. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert was wounded 3 times on July 2nd as the battalion captured the lower defenses on Culp's Hill. Major William Goldsborough, second in command, was then given command of the unit. So the next day, the Marylanders launched a second attack in what is now called Party Field. Late in the morning of July 3, General Johnson ordered a bayonet charge against the well-fortified enemy lines. Stuart was appalled and strongly critical of the attack, but direct orders could not be disobeyed. I saw in an instant the object of the movement and told Captain Williamson it was nothing less than murder to send men into that slaughter pen. Captain Williamson agreed with me, and moreover said that General Stuart strongly disapproved of it, but it was the order of General Edward Johnson, and it was imperative that it be completed. The attack on Party Field failed. The 3rd Brigade attempted several times to gain control of Culp's Hill, and the result was literally a slaughter pen as the 1st Maryland and 3rd North Carolina regiments courageously charged a well-defended position strongly held by 3 brigades, a few reaching within 20 paces of the enemy line. Ironically, opposing them was the 1st Maryland Eastern Shore Regiment.
Okay.
So here's that second time where 2 Maryland regiments, first numerical designation, actually come up against each other and fight. It should be noted that this thing about brother against brother, maybe cousin against cousin, the color sergeant, Robert Ross of the 1st Maryland Eastern Shore Regiment, was the cousin of the color sergeant, P.M. Moore of the Confederate 1st Maryland Regiment, and Moore was wounded several times in the fighting. So both of the color sergeants were actually related. They were cousins fighting against each other at Gettysburg. So severe the casualties were that Stuart is said to have broken down and wept, wringing his hands and crying, "My poor boys." At Gettysburg, the 1st Maryland lost 52 killed, 140 wounded, and 15 missing, totaling 207 out of the 400 men engaged. Major Goldsborough, who had taken over command and led the unit on July 3rd, was among the wounded. Now, this is a direct quote. A bullet ripped into his the left side of his chest, entering at the 3rd rib, passed through his lung, and exited out his back. When the Confederates were pushed back, his comrades carried him to a private residence where 3 other wounded officers, with 300 wounded officers, and left them there.
300 or 3?
3.
Okay.
3. Most, including Lieutenant George Booth, took their last farewell of Herbert and Goldsborough, whose wounds they believed would be, fatal. Following the battle, Major Goldsborough and Lieutenant Colonel James Herbert were both captured, transferred to Camp Letterman, along with some 6,800 Confederate wounded. Both were later transferred to Fort McHenry, Baltimore, which is where they're from, for further treatment, and then on to Fort Delaware as prisoners of war. So they're off being treated, and they both survive, and they end up at Fort Delaware. So meanwhile, Charles is in Libby prison, and he's worked out a deal with the Confederates, and he gets a parole. And it says Dr. Charles Goldsborough has permission to go north, giving his parole to return to Richmond, Virginia within 40 days if he does not secure the acquiescence of the federal authorities in making an exchange. So Charles accepted the parole and went north. Aided by Secretary Salmon Chase and others, Charles succeeded in effecting the release of about 100 federal surgeons confined in Libby Prison, as well as several more Confederate surgeons confined at Fort McHenry. Unfortunately, Ulysses S. Grant and Edward Stanton opposed the exchange, which was unable to do anything towards effecting more general exchanges. Charles returned to his home in Hunterstown, Pennsylvania, which is located, like I said, 5 miles northeast of Gettysburg. He arrived there in late October, early November, but he arrived in time to attend the consecration of Gettysburg on November 19, 1863. So he was a witness to the Gettysburg Address. And it says, in his memoir, it says, "This seems strange and almost remarkable, but the great throng was there more to see Mr. Lincoln than to hear what he had to say. The day was an ideal Indian summer day with just enough crisp in the air to make fall clothing comfortable. The consecration he witnessed, of course, included Lincoln's famous Gettysburg Address. Ironically, the address takes place only a short distance from where his brother William had been wounded at Culp's Hill." Just kind of, an interesting fact. So in December 1863, Charles...
But he doesn't know his brother's wounded.
Has no idea.
Or killed in the battle or even fought in the battle.
That's right. Until December 1863. Charles was assigned to the medical staff at Fort Delaware.
Huh. Who else was there?
Well, let's see. Well, first off, the fort was a former harbor defense facility designed by Joseph Totten. It was on Peapatch Island in Delaware, on the Delaware River. During the Civil War, the Army used it as a POW camp. By the time Charles arrived there in December 1863, there were 11,000 prisoners on the island. So, kind of interesting that he goes to the same place where his wounded brother is. So when William disembarked on Fort Delaware, he soon discovered his brother William, who, as we mentioned before, was severely wounded at Gettysburg, and he also discovered his brother Eugene.
Both there.
Both there.
Can you just imagine what that was like, just for a second? You think you're showing up there to do surgeon stuff. You're working. Your brothers are on the other side of the war. You don't know what's happened to you. You probably haven't talked to them since the war began, more than likely. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've interacted with them on the battlefield without even knowing it, possibly. Yeah. 2 other times. And now you walk, you're in Delaware. Yeah. It's just crazy to think about.
And you come in.
And how do you, what is that moment like when you actually come into contact with them? Like, does someone pull you aside when you first get there? Probably not. You're not making the connection of the last names. Or are you walking through the halls of one of the hospital bays?
Probably. You're doing your rounds.
And then you're just doing your rounds, and all of a sudden you're like, that guy looks rough, but he looks really familiar. The beard's a little longer than I remember, but oh my gosh. That moment is just crazy. We cannot imagine that today.
And it's interesting because Eugene, who was a member of Harry Gilmore's battalion, had been captured earlier on an expedition into West Virginia. He wasn't wounded, but he was there. Yeah. So both were prisoners of war. And it's said that Charles, later in life, would often enjoy telling the story of his unusual family get-togethers. Yeah. Which you can imagine, 2 of them are on one side of the war and you're on the other side of the other,
Might be a little awkward.
So just to sum up what happens to Charles, okay, he gets reassigned to Bermuda 100 on the James, joining the command of General Benjamin Butler. Here he attends to the wounded and assisted in the siege of Petersburg. Charles himself, out trying to bring back wounded one morning on July 6, 1864, is wounded himself. He's sent to Chesapeake Hospital in Hampton, Virginia, and that's where he would spend the next several months recuperating. Following his recovery, they determined he was unfit for further field duty, and he was due to disability, but he was sent to Lincoln Hospital in Washington, D.C., where he spent the remainder of the war. He returned to Hunterstown, Pennsylvania, resumed his medical practice after the war, and continued farming. Charles would, on November 14, 1866, marry again. Name was Alice. They would have 10 children. Charles was, after the war, he became a member of the Corporal Skelly Post, number 9 GAR in Gettysburg. He died on October 18, 1913, at the age of 78, and is buried at Evergreen Cemetery, which is, Nick has a connection to that too.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what happens to Charles. But what happens to William? You know, that's the question.
And Eugene.
And Eugene.
But
well, let me tell you what happens to Eugene, okay?
Okay.
In February of 1865, Eugene gets sick.
No, this is not a good start to the
It's
story.
not a good start.
Okay.
And Eugene will actually succumb to the disease
During the war?
in February of 65.
Wow.
And he will die actually
In prison?
in prison.
Fort Delaware?
Yes. Charles will not be there. Charles,
Okay.
of course, will have been reassigned at the time.
Where's he buried at Fort Delaware? Is he buried there? Or is his body
No,
taken?
I'll tell you that
Okay.
a little bit later on.
Jumping the gun.
Yeah.
Jack's just excited.
I'm
that's
just
all.
excited.
So in June of 64, and we have to go to Charleston now, okay, to where the war started, okay?
Not
so,
West Virginia.
Not West Virginia.
Not West-
no.
Okay. Just making sure.
In June of 1864, the Confederate Army had imprisoned 5 generals and 45 Union Army officers in the city of Charleston, South Carolina, using them as human shields. So in retaliation, Secretary of War Stanton ordered 50 captured Confederate officers of similar ranks to be taken to Morris Island, South Carolina. The Confederates landed on Morrison Island late in July of that year and were utilized to the same purpose as human shields. The scheme worked as they would eventually force an exchange of all 50 officers. So the commanding general, Samuel Jones, thought, if I can exchange 50, what if I brought 600 here?
Yeah.
Great idea. Let's just bump it up.
Good business guy right there.
He
He's
is.
like, you know.
So he brings 600 prisoners to Charleston from Andersonville Prison and from Camp Oglethorpe, which is in Macon, Georgia,
Okay.
to try to compel a larger exchange. And, you know, they're there. And, of course, the Union is bombarding Charleston with 600 Union officers. And so now they've gotten rid of the 50 human shields that the Union forces had. So what do?
Yeah.
They bring 600 men south. In late 1864, William Goldsborough and 599 other prisoners were transferred to Morris Island. Bound for Charleston, the 600 Confederate officers faced the worst conditions that they had yet encountered as prisoners. Forced to lie shoulder to shoulder in the ship's hold below the waterline, one prisoner said that they lay in total darkness without any clothing and drenched in perspiration
Oh, my God.
from the summer heat, which was intensified by the ship's boilers. The ship was the Crescent City, which rolls in heavy seas, and all the prisoners became seasick, leading one on board to describe the ship's hold as a veritable cesspool, which the Union guards refused to hose down. In this environment, Rebs were fed just a few crackers and a bit of salt beef or bacon each day. Drinking water was also scarce. One prisoner described it had a disagreeable smell and very sickly taste. So the 600 officers were placed on Morris Island in the stockade, and the regiment that was assigned to guard them, interesting regiment, 54th Massachusetts. You've heard of them.
I have.
Okay.
But for our listeners that haven't, Pete, go tell them.
Yes. Well, the 54th was a noted black regiment, actually, that had assaulted Fort Wagner in, was it July of 63? Somewhere in that time frame, right? And, of course, originally the commander had been Robert Gould Shaw, but the substitute commander at this time was a man by the name of Colonel Edward Hollowell. And even Hollowell had been wounded 3 times in the charge, but he recovered and came back and, you know, would be in charge of the regiment at this point.
The 54th is also the topic of the movie Glory.
Glory.
Of 1980.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's before my time.
Ferris Bueller.
Ferris Bueller.
Ferris Bueller.
Thanks a lot.
Ferris
Ferris
Bueller
Bueller is Robert Gould Shaw, Denzel Washington, and Morgan Freeman. So,
If you want to read something really interesting, there's a book called The Immortal 600,
yeah.
and that's what these men are called. All is the Immortal 600.
Okay.
So Lieutenant Colonel Herbert and Goldsborough, the second man, were among the 600 officers that were there. At the,
He's taken from Fort Delaware.
all the way to...
Okay.
Yeah.
Were all 600 from Fort Delaware?
All 600 come from there.
Okay.
Right. So it says they were among the 600 Confederate officers, prisoners of war, who were placed within range of Confederate batteries at Charleston during the fierce assault in that city. Suffering many hardships, privations, having often killed and eaten cats and other animals to survive. What could have been more cowardly and despicable than such treatment to such heroes? That's, you know. The standoff continued until a yellow fever outbreak forced Confederates to take the Union prisoners out of town. And in exchange for that, the Union actually moved the men to Fort Pulaski at the mouth of the Savannah River in Georgia. Over 500 tired, and by the way, not a single Confederate was injured or killed, even though they were used as human shields during that whole thing. More of them died from starvation than from anything else. So crowded into the fort's casements for 42 days, a retaliation ration of 10 ounces of moldy cornmeal and 1/2 pint of soured onion pickles, one of your favorites probably, was the only food issued to the prisoners.
I do like pickles.
Despite the best intentions of the fort's command, the prisoners never received sufficient food, blankets, or clothes, even during the winter months. In March of 1865, the survivors were shipped back to Delaware, where 25 more succumbed to illness. Major Goldsborough was among the survivors and remained there until after the war ended. The last members of the Immortal 600 were released from Fort Delaware in July of 1865. So William, shortly after his release, where does he go? He goes to Winchester. And what does he
England.
do? Here.
Virginia. Perfect.
Okay, and what does he do? He establishes a newspaper called the Winchester, Virginia Times in Winchester. And also, he had an evening edition called the Evening Star, which published his first issue September 7th, 1865.
So he starts the Winchester Evening Star?
Here, yes.
Wow.
Yep. So anyway, it's just...
William Goldsborough.
William Goldsborough comes back to Winchester.
Confederate veteran, Immortal 600.
Yes.
Wow. And he ran a printing business, like you said, before the war, right?
That's right, in Baltimore. That's true. So he stays here until 1869, and he sells the newspaper. He goes to Philadelphia and works for 20 years at the Philadelphia Record. Then he went to the Pacific Northwest, where he stayed out there for several years. Also, he established his own newspaper called the Tacoma Daily Globe. And out there, he gets kind of a reputation as being a great printer, a really up and coming. He invests in real estate. He works for the Everett Herald, and then he ends up coming back to Philadelphia, but he's forced to retire in 1896 after being run over by a bicycle. And so
damn bike riders.
All the time. Man.
So what happens? William's thigh, it says, was crushed, and he was forced to walk for the rest of his life with the use of crutches.
What year was that?
That was 1896.
So the bikes in 1896, those big wheels.
They do.
I always imagine that, like those bikes going in like slow motion too. And what is he like laying on the ground? He's like, oh no, and he has like 10 seconds to still move, and it just still coming towards him. And
can you imagine a guy that's been wounded twice?
What happened to during war? And this is what takes him out.
This is what takes him. Basically, will take him out.
A big wheel and a little wheel.
Yes.
Maybe it was the little wheel that got him in the back. That's the one that goes back there.
The determining blow.
Gosh.
So you're almost done with me. After the war, William writes the book, about the service of the Maryland line. It was published in 1869. He dies on Christmas Day, 1901. I think he's 67. His last request to his wife was, "Don't bury me among those damn Yankees." So his wife honored his wishes, and he died and was what on his tombstone says he's an unrepented Confederate soldier. He's buried on Confederate Hill at Loudon Park Cemetery in the city of Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
Now, you asked about Eugene, and this is the last thing I'll say. He died on February 21st, 1865. He was 21 years old. He's buried in the Confederate section of Finns Point National Cemetery in Pennsville, New Jersey. Originally purchased by the federal government for the construction of a battery to protect the port of Philadelphia, the land became a cemetery in 1863 for Confederate prisoners of war who died in captivity at Fort Delaware. Nearly 2,700 prisoners died from malnutrition and neglect there. Confederate prisoners interred at the cemetery total about 2,436 and are all buried in a common grave in what was then a big pit in the northwestern corner of the site. It was officially made a national cemetery on October 3, 1875 by the request of Virginia Governor James L. Kemper, a former Confederate general who had criticized the poor maintenance of the Confederate grave sites. And by the way, Eugene's name is actually on a template that's at the base of the monument there, so you can actually verify he was indeed buried there
in the mass grave.
In the mass grave.
Wow.
Right. And that is the story of the Goldsborough brother. Oh, I forgot one more, and that's
The other brother.
Louis Goldsborough.
Oh, there is another brother.
There is the fifth brother. He's listed as a wartime journalist.
Okay.
For the Baltimore Sun, and he writes a lot of first-hand accounts of battles like the Battle of First Bull Run, Antietam, and one has to, even though the information isn't all there, it makes me feel like he was maybe with the Army making those reports back to the Baltimore Sun. I have no other information other than you can go online and you look up some of his stories, but I have no idea what happened to him, where he's buried or anything like that. And that's brother number 5.
Wow. So he still was involved with the war, though.
They all were.
In a journalist perspective.
That's right.
Wow.
And that is the end of my story. Okay?
Well, that's amazing.
And he's sticking to it.
And he's sticking to it. This is the one you're sticking to.
This is the one I'm sticking to.
So for now, as this comes out, now, if you listen to this years from now, when it was posted, I'm sure you'll be able to find more information about what Pete has just discussed in other sources. But as of now, this will be the only place this lives until when, Pete? Where can people find more information about what you have researched in these Goldsborough brothers in the near future?
It'll eventually be put on my blog. I'm not going to put it out there until you have this out there first. You know? I'm not going to put it on the blog to compete with you.
Of course. Competition. We love a good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
anyways, that's the story.
That's fantastic. And I think the cool thing for the listeners to remember is that there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of stories just like this one.
Yes.
That all these pictures you see of these soldiers or the names you read or all this stuff, there's thousands of these moments in time to where you can, I'm sure as Pete was describing it, you can make somewhat of a connection, whether if you have a sibling or not, running into an old friend from high school or something like that. It gives you a chance to relate just for a moment and make a connection with this conflict we're also fascinated by. And there's thousands of these stories. As you can see, I guess in the episode image, we'll have pictures of Charles and William Goldsborough that you had sent me. So
there is one other thing which I did find out actually last night when I was doing some research.
Oh God!
There's another brother. His name is Leander. Okay, and nothing is really mentioned about him. My wife did some research while I was off last night and found a pension record for Leander. And Leander apparently was a contract surgeon. So he didn't belong to a regiment. But he was in Winchester post-war. We know he was a surgeon during the war. We don't know where or with who. Contract surgeon.
Yeah.
But we do know that he was in Winchester until 1869. So he would have been here at the same time that his brother was establishing the newspaper.
Yeah.
That's all I know about him. So I can't tell. And that's hot off the press, okay?
Hot off of the Goldsborough press.
That's right.
Winchester Evening Star.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Pete, thank you so much.
Sure.
Elijah, anything
Thank
you want to
you
add?
for inviting me.
Just one more time about the Southern Star high rye bourbon whiskey from Southern Distilling Company in Statesville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
I just finished mine. It is good.
Yeah, I think everybody's glass is empty, so it must have been
I
pretty
had
good.
2.
Yeah.
Did you really?
I did, Pete. Well, I didn't have to talk a lot like you. I thought, and I will say, as I was drinking it, I almost got a hint of, like, after I took a sip and then I took a sip of water later, I almost got like kind of chocolatey notes in there too.
Maybe a little bit.
Just a little bit, not a ton, not a ton, but like maybe like that could be from the orange and the coffee soda we had
Coffee
earlier.
sodies. Yeah.
Some coffee sodies.
You guys had a lot of caffeine before.
There's
this
no
too.
caffeine.
That remains to be determined.
Shout out to Hopscotch Coffee here in Winchester on the first Winchester and second Winchester battlefield. Actually,
That's right.
Elijah and I were sipping on some coffee sodas this morning. But yeah, thank you to Southern Star. This was fantastic. Also want to thank History Fix. Stories like this one that Pete just described. I'm sure Will Eichler over at Civil War Digital Digest, contributor to History Fix, is going to listen to this episode and he's going to be like, wow, what another incredible story that maybe he can too bring to life. But if you also want to learn about fascinating stories like this one, other events, civilizations throughout our time, and figures themselves of history, you can bring that all to life in your living room with History Fix. You can watch movies, documentaries, short films, and how-to videos. And they have historic eras that currently range from the 1st to the 21st century. I'm talking them into the 22nd century. They said they can't do that yet. But their team of curators bring comprehensive and authentic historical content, and some of it the best that's available to the public right now. All of you listeners, Battlefields and Bourbon podcast fans, you can receive an extra 20% off your first year's annual subscription by signing up at www.historyfix, that's www.historyfix.com, and use promo code BATTLEFIELD, BATTLEFIELD. Every subscription includes a 7-day risk-free trial as well. So if you're just thinking about trying it out, you can do the 7-day risk-free trial. And if you're just so into it, you can use that promo code BATTLEFIELD and get 20% off that first year subscription. And after you sign up and after you're bought into it, you can download the History Fix apps on most places you stream your shows from. So escape into History Fix today. Discover more stories like the one Pete brought to life for us and for you all today at History Fix. So thank you to History Fix. Thank you to the Battlefields Foundation. Pete, anything you want to say?
No.
Any book recommendations?
Well, this book actually is called A Maryland Boy in Lee's Army. It's actually at the foundation. I borrowed it from there. It's interesting because this book actually was begun by William Goldsborough, but he was run over by a bicycle and never was able to finish it. So
The bike didn't kill him, did it?
No, it disabled him. And for some reason,
deformed.
I know some people that just take that thing and take that one moment where it just takes them out and they're just like, I'm done doing anything. So,
and he did. He stopped writing this book, and so this gentleman, George Wilson Booth, actually finished it.
I do have that book upstairs, actually. Yeah.
Do you? It's
in the
actually a
library
good.
here.
And then, of course, the history of the Maryland line is a good read as well. And the Immortal 600 is an excellent read.
Yeah.
And boy, there was mistreatment of prisoners on both sides, and it's illustrated.
100%.
Yeah, definitely illustrated in that book.
Well, Pete, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time and research and constant attention you bring to the American Civil War. Thank you all listeners so much for listening, liking, comment, subscribing, leaving reviews, all that fun stuff. We're excited to bring this episode to you, and we're excited to bring the next one. And like we always say, we'll catch you on the next one.